This is Chip Maxwell, and you're listening to the Retire Smart podcast with David Brooks. Could President Trump's tariffs improve the woeful budget outlook for our economy? What are the chances that lower tax rates will remain truly permanent? And is Social Security safe? David Brooks has answers to these questions in today's Q&A episode. Into the Q&A we go. And David, we've been talking about the September speaker series on and off this show. When we went to the Q&A, we invited the audience to write questions. We got about 36 questions. Of course, we couldn't get through them all that night, but we're going to use questions from that evening in the next few shows. And the first one is about tariffs and the budget. Becky talked about the need for more revenue to make budgets balance in the future. President Trump's tariff policies seem to be producing significant revenue and domestic investment. Could this improve some of the woeful budget numbers that she shared?
Well, it could in theory if we stop spending or continuing. But interest rates, as we talked about earlier in the show, coming down this week, will have a lot to do with that. In other words, rolling all our debt right now, we're currently rolling debt at about 60 basis points higher than the debt that's rolling off, that we're maturing. So the government, when we have debt mature, we turn around and have to issue new debt to pay off the existing debt and pay back the bondholders. And we're doing that at about a 60 basis point higher spread. Now, how much gets refinanced right now? We're talking about approximately $10 trillion in the next 12 months. So, what's 60 basis points on $10 trillion? That's $600 billion in additional interest. So are we going to get $600 billion in tariff revenue? Well, that's not what the current projections say. It's possible, right? But so right now we are still expanding that deficit even with this additional revenue. Right now I think we're estimating to get about $300 billion in tariff revenue. So if we get interest rates lower, then we can actually start to work down that deficit number. And I know the plan is basically 3% growth and 3% deficit spending is all we allow. And then we would be able to technically grow our way out of this debt scenario. But if we don't get that, then this debt is going to spiral. And you're going to see some pretty ugly numbers. And what will tell you if that's happening, all you got to do is watch the long end of the yield curve, right? So we talk about the 10-year Treasury, right, hovering around 4% this morning just to tick over it. We'll see if that goes under it today. But what's the 30-year Treasury? It's close to 5%. If that starts to go up to 5.5%, 6%, the world is telling you, no, it's not working. They're not going to pay down the debt. It's not going to help.
So what I'm hearing is, no, you can't just grow your way out with revenue increases. There still has to be spending control, spending reform.
I mean, just think if you've ever refinanced a mortgage. You bought a home and interest rates went down at some point in the life cycle. You lived in that home. You went and refinanced a mortgage. You extended the term of your debt, most likely, added some years, but you got a significantly lower payment. It freed up cash flow. You had a better budget, right? You had a better surplus in your take-home pay every month. That's what will happen to the government if rates go down. We'll have a surplus versus a deficit on some of these monthly numbers. And that's what we need to see happen consistently. Again, it's going to take some time for this to work out. But if interest rates do get significantly lower, that will greatly help. But again, if the world says, we don't believe you, and the long end of that curve goes up, then you're going to see a spike in inflation and a spike in debt like we saw in the 80s. And Chip, you're old enough to remember, I know you are, what it was like in the early to mid 80s with interest rates and inflations both in the double-digit range.
Yeah, especially brutal in Nebraska, especially in rural areas. All right, next question, David. This one's about the big, beautiful bill tax rebate. The over 65 tax rebate of $6,000 drops to zero after $250,000 of income. When and how does that work for various income levels?
So basically, it starts at $75,000. You start to lose it if you're single, and $150,000 if you're a married couple. So this is assuming you're a married couple, the 250 number. But basically, once a married couple's income goes over $150,000, real easy is every $10,000 they earn, they're going to lose about 10% of that $6,000 additional rebate. So if they earn $160,000, they'd lose $600 of that $6,000 credit per person, or they get $5,400 per person. But a married couple each get it. Right, so they would get $10,800 instead of $12,000. So basically, each $10,000 you're going to use 10% of your benefit. It doesn't matter if you're single or married; you go over the threshold. That's the basic way it's going to phase out on you.
David, we had a question about the extended tax cuts. The big beautiful bill extended the 2017 tax rates permanently, but then Becky said permanent on Capitol Hill does not necessarily mean forever. So what are the chances that the lower tax rates will remain truly permanent?
Well, I can give you my opinion, and I can give you what the statistical odds are. The statistical odds are 0 that these rates will stick around longer than eight years. I mean, literally, that's the math that comes from Wharton School of Finance, University of Pennsylvania, Stanford University, and the CBO. All agree tax rates are going up. And she talked about 30% lower tax rates in the year 2000, if you remember from the presentation. They're going to go up 40% across the board. So just understand that a dual-income family, the prominent dual-income families in this country, the majority and the medium, are paying a 22% marginal tax rate today, Chip. If that goes up to, say, 30%, how big of an increase is that? Well, that's a decent size increase, about 35%. On the higher earners, if they took 37, currently the top bracket, I know that's where I pay, right? There's proposals, and they've been in committee, so this is all public, you can go find it, to take it to 54% to match Canada and European taxation models. I'm sorry. I'm going to take my toys and go home. If I can't keep half of what I generate, why would I want to play that game anymore? And what you will do is you'll create a scarcity of capital. But again, Art Lafler, a great economist who's actually advising the current administration, came to fame way back under Reagan, created the Laffer curve, as we call it, right? So you can raise taxes, and Clinton proved it. You can raise them marginally when we're in deficit waters. And if you remember, and again, I was not the biggest fan of Clinton, but economically he was a pretty sharp president because he made compromises when things needed to be made. And we walked in and handed the keys over to George Bush Jr., if you will, W. We had a surplus. And a lot of people forget that. In the year 2000, we actually had a budget surplus because they took the top marginal bracket from 35 back then up to 39.6, basically 40%, and the economy still moves. So you can move the needle some. Now, the other thing is we have to expand the brackets. We should add a bracket for top earners, right? Because the top bracket today kicks in on a married couple around $750,000. But why not have a bracket that's at like $3 million or $5 million for the super income? And this would, and I'm not saying go take a big chunk, just add 1 or 2% on for those higher earners. And again, I'm not a pro tax guy. I'm just telling you, this is how logic though would solve these problems. So again, we'll see. But my opinion is no, I don't think the tax rates will last past 2032 personally.
We've been throwing a lot of numbers around. I just want to make sure I understand and we understand. You started by saying you threw out 30%. I think Becky Swansburg's point was generally the tax burden right now is
historically low,
30% lower than it was the year 2000.
2000 is what she referenced, correct? Yeah.
But given the way spending and budgets are going, taxes are going to go nowhere but up in the near future. And unfortunately, that's why we put such an emphasis on tax planning.
Well, it's even going to happen for lower income, right? So a married couple making about $80,000 to $100,000 is today in what's called the 12% tax bracket. You take 12 to 15, right? That's about a 15% increase in their tax burden, percentage-wise, right? Because that's a huge jump. Excuse me, it's more than that. But if it's 12% and we add 3 full percentage points on that, it's like 25% increase in their marginal tax rate. And if you happen to jump from 12 all the way up to 25, right, you've doubled your tax rate. And that's if you're rewarded for more income, so we double your rate. And again, that's where we have to get these brackets a little bit more systemically set up to accurately reflect rewarding those that are productive in society. Again, our current tax system, Chip, very simply rewards non-productivity, sadly. We want to reward productivity and economic activity because that grows the tax base.
Let's squeeze in one more, David, about Social Security. Becky Swansburg spent a lot of time emphasizing the main entitlement program, Social Security and Medicare, and what a large chunk of the budget they are. Well, that prompted one of our attendees to simply ask, is Social Security safe?
No. Now, do I think they're going to take Social Security away from anybody currently on it or even reduce their bill? So just so you understand, Congress is right now projecting an 18% reduction in your monthly benefit in 2033. Well, I will tell you with COLA adjustments, your benefit will be more than 18% larger than it is today. Historical COLA adjustments, Social Security, 2.8% a year. So if we ran that out for 8 years, you'd have the same check then, even with the cut that you do today. Now, that wouldn't help you with inflation, but the reality is you won't have $1 less, even if that cut comes in place. I don't even think they have the political capital or kahunas, whatever you want me to call it here.
Careful. The compliance officer is with us this week.
So
in the
we have
studio.
to get back to if we had logic in the room, I don't want to pay more taxes, but the reality is the income cap that we pay into Social Security keeps going up, right? That number was in the $130,000 range. It's very similar to Medicare, by the way, and is now basically capped off at $180,000 in income. So anything you over 180, you no longer pay into Social Security with the Social Security tax out of your paycheck. So they're going to continue to push that number higher so that higher income earners like me have to pay more into Social Security. So that's one way they'll continue to do that. The other thing is they should push the age at which you can draw Social Security back. We are living so much longer. We've had Social Security now. It was enacted in 1935, so we're 90 years into this temporary experiment. It was supposed to be temporary, by the way. And we've only actually made the age adjustment one time, and that was in 1983. So we took the full retirement age from 65, and we moved it all the way back to 67. Well, it's time we do that actual math again because, one, we work longer, we're living longer, so you would actually still get more benefits, so we just need to get that work done and stop crying that, oh, you're stealing my benefits. No, we want to protect your benefits, and the only way to do that is to have solvent math in the system.
Thank you for listening to the Retire Smart podcast with David Brooks. If you want to learn how to generate lifetime income, reduce your tax bill, and maintain your lifestyle in retirement, visit retiresmartpodcast.com. And make sure to subscribe to keep up with new episodes every week.